What is the 4% rule and why it matters? This week on the Extreme Personal Finance Show. Hey, I'm Chris. Welcome to episode 33. No, 33. What episode 34?
34, I think.
Yeah, episode 34 of the Extreme Personal Finance Show. My name is Chris. Joining me, Dan. Dan, how you doing
Hello.
today?
Doing well.
You're in the festive spirit.
Yes. I got my nutcracker here. Let's get cracking.
Let's get cracking. I love it. That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm trying to buy more festive sweaters. So during the summertime, I wear a lot of Hawaiian shirts. And I don't have a lot of quirky winter things. I need to get more of them.
Right on.
They don't have to be Christmas related necessarily, but just like not just jackets and sweatshirts. Something that's got a little bit more character.
There you go. I'm looking forward to us getting together in a couple weeks for monthly Stacking Benjamins local Twin Cities meetup group.
Yeah, it's gonna be awesome.
I know we were talking about we're gonna have an ugly sweater contest. I will say I did find one. And I'm not going to tell you, but it's going to be great.
Okay, I've got my eye on one. I've seen one or two. I don't know if they'll get here in time, but
right on.
Hopefully we don't thinking the exact same thing and show up, and because then we'd have to have a tie, or we'd have to see like who can throw the axe the closest to see who wins or something.
That's right. It'll be good. Well, hey, this week on the Extreme Personal Finance Show, I'm excited to kind of talk through the 4% rule and really what it is, how this came to be, why is it a thing? Why is it kind of like this guideline that a lot of people use to kind of calculate what their drawdown strategy is? I don't know. I think maybe it's just sometimes it maybe is a little more fun, a little more compelling to talk about 4% rule. I remember I was talking to my buddy a while back, and I was like, when I was talking about blogging, and I was like, yeah, I'm excited to get to blog more, and I'm going to do articles on like how to calculate a good drawdown strategy. And he was like, that sounds pretty boring, and I probably wouldn't do that. And I'm like, yeah, okay. Well, I tried to make it a little fun, and we were talking about, when we plan for retirement, one of the decisions that we often, need to figure out, and one of the biggest unknowns, right? People always say, well, how much money do we need in retirement? What do we need invested in like our nest egg? And that, it's so funny. Like people always talk about like, well, how big is your nest egg? And it's kind of a silly term, I think, but basically like what you have invested or saved in your retirement accounts and your brokerage accounts, like what monies, dude, since you're smart, how come sometimes, sometimes we can use money single and plural, and sometimes we use monies as plural, like in accounting?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. Maybe it has something to do with British people with their maths. I don't know.
Right on. I need to figure that piece out, because it's funny how sometimes monies is the correct word, and it's funny to me. Anyway, but yeah, so we got to kind of figure out, can we still afford to live our lives while in retirement, whether you retire early or not, right? I mean, we're talking once you reach retirement age, whatever that is for you, right?
Sure.
Do you have enough money that you can start withdrawing money from those accounts to live your life, right? A meaningful, purposeful life. And what often people talk about, and if you try to Google and search and asking ChatGPT, whatever you're going to do to get the answers of like, how much money do I need to retire? One of the things that you come across is this magical thing called the 4% rule. And so I wanted us to kind of talk through like, what is this rule and why do we use it? Yeah. It's interesting because you and I were kind of chatting a little bit, and you have some awesome opinions about it. I think you said I got
thoughts. I have some thoughts for sure.
Yeah. So one of the things, and again, like I was kind of late to the game, right? When I again didn't really know anything about finance, and I just started like again, it all started with like Mr. Money Mustache and all the other blogs and stuff. And I
Sure.
just started saving and investing as much as I could while I was working. It wasn't until a couple years into that where I kind of learned about what this magical 4% rule was. And just a little bit of background, it was actually introduced back in 1994, which I want to also mention that that was also the year that Pantera dropped their Far Beyond Driven album. Which was pretty awesome. I was working at Tidal Wave Video back then. Do you remember Tidal Wave?
No, I don't.
Yeah.
I
So
don't.
Tidal Wave Video, it was weird. It was like a store that had like video stuff on one side, music stuff on the other side.
Okay.
When it comes to music, you want a store that's playing your song. And when it comes to videos, you want a store that brings Hollywood home. Tidal Wave is it. People that know music and video. Cool. And will help you find exactly what you want. Exactly what you want for the holidays.
Exactly what you want.
And I remember I worked overnight when they released Pantera's Far Beyond Driven album, and it was awesome because there was just a bunch of crazy long-haired knuckleheads waiting for it to come out at midnight.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I feel like this is a good example of our two personalities, because that's what you think of when 1994. And
Yeah.
for me, I was thinking, and I double checked, and I was correct that was the first season of Friends came out in '94.
oh, did it really?
Yeah.
Right on. Well, I'm a
So-
huge Friends fan too. I watched every
Okay.
episode. So yeah, that's funny. Oh my gosh.
Well, I've got to talk to him.
Yeah, he's in China.
The country.
No, wait. His flight doesn't leave for another 45 more minutes.
What about the time difference?
From here to the airport?
Yes.
Okay. Well, it was that is funny, dude. I didn't think really 94. You know, that's a show too that's still always funny.
To people who found it funny, I would say,
you know,
yeah.
I
Every
mean,
now
my
and again,
opinion-
I see a comment that's just like, "This is the worst show ever," and I don't
Really?
understand how those people what they find funny. But
What
well,
I,
it's just like people like Seinfeld. I don't. But anyway, I
well,
digress.
actually, what's crazy is like my daughter. I remember in her 20s. She's 22 now. I think when she was like 20, she binged all of Friends.
hmm
So they're finding, the next generations of fans, right? And that's why it was kind of cool. We went out to Hollywood. We got our picture taken on the Friends couch,
Okay.
and my kids actually knew what it was, right? It's kind of crazy.
Right on.
Anyway, so basically,
1994. Bill Bengen.
yeah, this dude, basically he did tons of calculations. So this financial advisor, he looked at tons of research back, like, I don't know, like 50 some years of market data, including like stock and bond, different returns for stocks and bonds, and tried to figure out what a safe withdrawal rate, how much you could withdraw, and then under all these different market conditions to find what you could withdraw and like not run out of money for the next, he did it around 30 years or so. So I know some people say, well, you can withdraw at a 4% rule, you can withdraw 4% of your investments and never run out of money. Well, the calculations say about 30 years. I mean, if you continue to get the same return, I guess in theory, you would never run out.
Sure. My understanding of it was more so not that. So he was looking at 30-year returns because that was a typical what a financial planner was doing for their clients in the 90s, right? So if you retired around 60 or so,
Got it.
you're
Okay.
not living much past 90. I was not under the impression, I'll go back and find the old financial planning archive thing. It's like one of those you got to zoom in really close to try and read it, but you can. But from my recollection, he was looking at 30-year time periods because that's what he was doing for his
Sure.
clients. So,
That would
and then
make
the
sense.
4% rule was, okay, it didn't necessarily run out of this. It wasn't that the 4% rule on year 30 with 365 days, the portfolio went to zero.
Right, right.
So, which I think is some people are like, oh, well, so if you live 31 years, then you have no money. It's like, not necessarily.
Right.
It's not.
Yeah, yeah. No, that makes sense. And so that's why, and again, it's one of those things where we need to look at those of us that may have longer than 30 years in retirement.
Mm-hmm.
We need to make sure that we are, basically building a good drawdown strategy for us because we have a longer horizon left, right?
Right.
And so just to break it down, super simple, like what is the 4% rule? So this basically is kind of a rule of thumb. I like it because it's kind of really a simple calculation to just say, I should be able to take out 4% of your retirement savings that first year of retirement. And then keeping up with inflation. So you adjust whatever you're going to take out for inflation in the following years.
Yep.
Your whatever invested assets you have should last for your retirement years. It should last indefinitely, right? So it was, oh, go ahead.
So long as
Yes. So long as
so long as your expenses don't exceed what that 4% is.
Exactly. Yeah, we're going to talk about it. So if we review, an example would look something like this. Let's say your cost of living, your expenses are like 40 grand. So if you could live off of $40,000 a year, that would mean that your invested assets would need to be like $1 million. So the first year you would take out $40,000. Then the following year, right? Then the next year you adjust for inflation. Typically, we're using around 2% for that number. For a long time, that's the number we used. Let's not talk about where it was the last few years. So then basically that next year you would take out, about $800 more, and then so on and so on. So that's kind of an example of what that would be. But I like the fact how we got to nail it down is how do we actually calculate how much money we need and still use that 4% rule. And you hit the nail on the head, man. We have to be able to clearly define what are our expenses going to be.
Sure. Well, at least have an idea, right? Because, there's any number of different things that can happen in retirement with Social Security, which could be a whole other episode. The people who think that it's going to be completely gone. If you listen to enough podcasts of different places, somebody has already told you, but we'll be happy to do it in the future. Even those doomers who are like, Social Security is going to be different. It's like, it's going to be different. It's not going to be gone. It's just going to be different. Some people want it gone, but that's also a different topic.
Right.
But the point being, there'll be likely some kind of Social Security around, or if you happen to have accumulated a rental property or two. So that's going to be different income sources as well, which may mean you're not even withdrawing 4% from your portfolio. Right. So for me, when I talk with people about the 4% rule, I try to remove it from the retirement discussion. At first, to just be thinking about what is the 4% rule, right? Because you could start it when you're 10, with the 4% rule. If you were going to live till you're 40, kind of morbid, but the point being,
right.
Point being, the 4% rule is just how long or what rate can you withdraw from a portfolio while inflation is occurring and while the portfolio is growing, and have it live on in perpetuity, right? Mm-hmm. It's not necessarily having to be driven by in retirement or anything like that. It's just, if you have this much money that's growing at this rate and you're pulling out a amount that's growing at this rate, the inflation rate, how long will it last? And Bill Bengen, followed by another study after him by Trinity University, found around 4% was the amount that you could withdraw plus inflation and have it not run out. And then after that is then we get to apply it to, okay, so what does that mean for retirement? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm,
So I like to think of the 4% rule separate and then introduce that. It's like, okay, so for retirement, you're going to have Social Security. Maybe if you worked in a public sector or whatnot, or you'll have like a pension, like a teacher pension or a state pension or something. Maybe a military pension, maybe a rental property. And then now you can fluctuate what you're withdrawing from that portfolio. So
right.
I like to think of them separately first and then look at how that impacts retirement.
Got it. It's interesting because I always came at it with my other income sources as gravy on the top. So I looked at it as I have to get my investment portfolio up to this amount so that once I'm able to like withdraw my 4%, or again, there are other alternatives, right? You can go a 3% rule or a 5% rule. We could talk through that too as well. But then I look at Social Security, side hustle stuff, my rental income, all that. I haven't really even factored that yet, which is probably dumb. I probably should be factoring that in a little bit better. But at this point, I'm not, I don't plan on doing any sort of drawdown on my retirement accounts until I'm at full retirement age.
Sure. Yeah.
So
yeah, well, and then to that point though, it's just like if you're not even pulling from those accounts yet, like say you're there now, right? Mm-hmm. Where you could, but you're not even gonna be drawing from them for 20 years. Well, now they've doubled 2 or 3 times. Do you have to adhere to the 4% rule, or can you be drawing out a lot more because it's grown and you haven't touched it? So, which is why some people, it's been very interesting the last year. You mentioned, inflation and how that's had an impact. Bill Bengen has been interviewed within the last year, and he's looking at more like 5 or 6% now, where everyone a year and a half ago was like, oh, the 4% rule is dead. Now it's the 3% rule. Everybody who studies this and makes a whole lot of articles and makes a living off of saying, here's the new thing, they don't know either.
Right.
I've seen between and not from. So interestingly enough, about a year ago, maybe, Dave Ramsey said a thing.
Oh gosh,
and got a whole lot of people.
He broke the internet. He broke.
Because that's just wrong. You don't need to have a 3% withdrawal rate. That's ridiculous. Or I hope you misunderstood. I hope we didn't put out trash like that.
Was it 4 to 5%? Like that?
No, it shouldn't be 4 to 5%. It ought to be more than that. I mean, if you're making 12 in good mutual funds and the S&P is average 11.8, and if inflation for the last 80 years is average 4%, if you make 12 and you need to leave 4% in there for inflation raises, that leaves you 8. So I'm perfectly comfortable drawing 8.
Well, what was interesting was some really smart people had an episode about why Dave Ramsey is wrong. And throughout the whole thing, they were consistently talking about 6% being feasible. And it's just like, okay, so, I mean, you're 2% higher than the 4% rule. He's just 2% higher than you.
Right.
So, I mean, and who really knows, right? So, I don't know. I think it's a little, I don't know if dangerous is the right word, short-sighted to just pick a number and run with it. Sure. You got to be willing to adjust along the way.
Well, I think, and one reason why I wanted to kind of talk through this too, and why, like you mentioned, why it's really important if you can keep your expenses within whatever that number is, because I had mentioned to you before, I was having just a casual conversation with a family member, and I had mentioned something about the 4% rule, and they questioned, they're like, oh, well, what's that? And so I just I used the number of, if you can live on $40,000 a year, then if you have invested assets of around $1 million, you should be able to have enough to retire. Mm-hmm. And it was just like total eye-opening, right? This person was like, wait, what? And so I showed him the math, and he was like, whoa. So they were like, it was really kind of clicking with them, and they're like, well, so if I have over $1 million invested, I could maybe like even retire now. And I quickly paused and said, no, not the way that they spend.
Right. You can't.
Right, exactly. So
Somebody with $40,000 expenses can.
exactly, because like if the expenses far, I mean,
Right.
if you truly are, and this is the crazy thing to me, like if you listen to other podcasts and like Dave Ramsey and people call in and they're like, yeah, they spend $200,000 a year on their lifestyle. Well, yeah, then it's not going to work. You're going to need how many millions of dollars invested, right? So
50.
it's just crazy to me. So again, it's making sure we have those expenses dialed in, and again, it's going to
Right.
be
So you know, with at least with we were talking about this earlier. So you have a ballpark to aim for, so that you're not aiming at nothing.
right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I probably got a little too nerdy. Like the year leading up to me leaving work, I had a spreadsheet where I had basically my retirement cost of living expenses. And I had everything from, every single utility. I had what my estimated healthcare was going to be, including my cell phone, gas for my truck, vehicle maintenance, putting aside money to like fix my car, do oil changes, my auto insurance, homeowners insurance, my taxes, how much money I was spending on groceries. And I even had like line item for dining in restaurant, eating out,
Sure. Yeah.
as well as music and entertainment because I go to live shows. So, I mean, I wanted to have a clear, okay, this is how much I spend. And actually, you know what? Have you done this exercise?
What, monthly?
Well, like how much
We are budgeters here in the Team Hein household.
I was going to say so including the fact that I'm putting away, I mean, this would be having a travel and adventures budget, music and entertainment budget. It would be another $300 a month for dining out. My monthly expenses would be around $3,400.
Okay.
But I can easily drop that down to like $2,000, removing some of the travel and adventure stuff, going to less shows. I can cut my dining budget in half and eat more at home. Like there's things that you could make that. So I think the big thing in my budget is the housing. The housing.
I was
item.
going to say, worth pointing out that if you can get down to 2,000, that means that your housing expense is
Zero.
zero.
Well, maintenance. Yeah, I have a maintenance budget. I think we talked about that.
You
right?
know, you do not have a mortgage or rent
Correct.
that is due every month. So,
Correct.
which is fine. So it's a good thing for anybody listening to this to shoot for or to include in their numbers, right?
Yeah. It's
Either, yeah.
I think to your point, you nailed it. Is just making sure that you have your expenses dialed in.
It's a good place. It's a good place to start and thinking. So you've got a place to aim. I'm gonna use this opportunity to interject my hot take on it. That
Yeah, man.
that I think sometimes it mostly comes up in financial independent and or FIRE circles, where the 4% rule gets looked at really early and really geared toward retirement. Be like, okay, my quote unquote my FI number is X dollars because these are my expenses today, and I'm saving, and I think I'll get X percentage return. So this is the number that I'm going to be at, and then they calculate how long it will take for them to get there. What they don't account for is that even the most frugal people, our expenses increase every year.
Yeah.
Because groceries go up, because the price of a vehicle, even if you're paying in cash, if you happen to need one in that time frame, those are getting more expensive. Insurance premiums go up.
Totally.
The cost it takes to live increases. Now you can control that to a certain extent by being mindful of where you're spending and whatnot. But the idea that 10 years from now, the amount that we're spending is going to be identical today is false, right?
Yep.
So what has to be accounted for, which usually isn't with the FI numbers, is that what your expenses are need to increase 3 to 4% per year on average out that amount of time. And calculate what you're saving for based off of that number, not today's number, if you want to be able to meet it by that point.
Right.
And so what I think happens a lot too is you hear this a lot on a lot of financial podcasts. You can only cut so far, but your income can go up as high as you want, right? Well, the same thing is true in this instance when we're talking about saving, is that, well, just live frugal, live frugal. It's like, well, yes, but it costs a certain amount of money to exist.
Right.
So if you make 60 grand, which is a respectable income, the average, or not the average, the median household income is around 80.
Right.
So if you're making more than that by yourself, make it $60,000 minus some taxes, right? And so if you're saving 50% of that, even, let's just leave taxes out of it, that's $30,000.
Right.
Right? Can you live on, like, you don't have a house payment, you're talking about $3,400 a month. So is it reasonable that someone who's making 60 can save $30,000 a year? Not really.
It's
right?
hard. It's hard. I don't think so. Yeah.
I'm sure there's somebody out there that would be like, I'm doing it. It's like, that's great. But for most people, you're not going to be saving at a rate high enough, fast enough to where you're going to be one of these people who's hitting their fine number in 10 years. Right.
Right.
So, which I think sometimes if you listen to certain podcasts, you start to think about how quickly can I quit my job? And I think this is why I have this hot take. They start thinking about how quickly can I quit my job, and I just need to save this much money and get there. And I don't want them to be disappointed. I'd rather them find a job they enjoy doing and saving 15 to 20% and just working for 15 to 20 years, which is about where that break even starts to happen, where you've saved enough to meet what your expenses have inflated to just because of what they are. So I don't know. It makes me nervous when I see people who are engineers making $150,000, saving 50% of their income, be like, this applies to everybody.
Right.
No, go find a job that you really love doing and just enjoy your life by saving 15% and worry about the 4% rule a little bit later.
Down the road, for sure. No, I like that hot take. And I think that goes along with other challenges that there are with the 4% rule. Like you said, it's not a one size fits all. It's not perfect. And so obviously we got to be conscious of market conditions, right? So if we go into those, times where there's bear markets and there's downturns and stuff, your nest egg will start to basically be depleted faster, right?
Yeah.
And also, like we talked earlier, the longevity risk. So now not only people are living longer, but again, if you live longer and you retire early, you're going to have to sustain yourself for 40, 50 years, maybe. I mean, who knows?
Yeah.
I did a bunch of calculations with this. So I have a Momente Mori calendar. It's basically a calendar. What's Momente Mori mean? It means like,
as often as you wake up, as often as you greet another person, just remember your death. That's what memento mori means. Memento mori, remember your death. In fact, I heard that it was one of those things where sometimes the monks and nuns would greet each other that way. The Christians would greet each other with this greeting of remember your death, which I think is funny kind of to think about and think like, hey, what's up? Good morning. Remember your death.
Basically like the realization of death or something. It's like,
oh, okay.
And so it has a square for every week that I'm alive. And every Sunday I cross off a week. And I used, when I created it sounds morbid, I know, but so I did a calculation, like I think there's a couple insurance companies and a couple other like online calculators. You put in information about your parents and you and your health and blah, blah, blah. And it spits out an age. Most likely you're going to live to like 83. And so like, I think that's the number I used. So if that's the case, I have, just over, half my life left and I got to make it count. I don't know. I don't know where was I going with
Yeah.
that? I don't know.
I don't know. Where do you want to go with it?
Oh, I know what it was. It was basically making sure your money lasts that long. Um, and then there's also rising costs. Like you said, your expenses are going to go up. Like I got a notice too. So like this is going to be my first time renewing my own healthcare, and already my premiums are going up.
Yep.
So it's like, man, damn it. And so, those things are going to happen, right? And then obviously we know that it's all based on if you have this balanced like 60-40 portfolio. That's something that we never really talked about too. That's like what this 4% rule is based off of. So again,
Yeah.
it can
Conservative,
change
not
depending-
100% stock, right? So
Yep, exactly. So again, we encourage you to work with a investment professional, a financial advisor, a financial coach to kind of walk through, well, what is the best allocation for you to meet your risk tolerance and your needs and that type of thing.
yeah, even if you hate those kind of people, you can still find one that will charge you an hourly rate to just have that one-time peace of mind. Okay, I'm not missing something here, and then go about your business. But yeah, either work with one or work with one temporarily. Just to have that different voice, right? That uninterested third party saying, "Hey, have you thought about this or that?"
Yeah, there are other alternatives to the 4% rule, and one thing is they're like a bucket strategy, and I know that there's been several people, like when I'm at like those 5 retreats like Camp Phi, they talk about the different bucket strategies. So you're going to have kind of a short-term bucket. You need that money soon. You're going to have this medium-term bucket, like a little bit further on, and this long-term bucket that you're going to need that money in, 15, 20 years. So where do you draw money from these buckets? And
yeah, the bucket strategy is good. There's some guardrails where it's just you kind of based off of, maybe you can spend a little bit more if the market just had a banger of a year and it's up 30%. Then it's like, okay, well, maybe you'd take out 5 or 6% this year and then revisit next year when that comes. And if it was a little bit worse of a year, dial it back down to 3.5-4%, which is where it's good to have a good idea of what your expenses are, both mandatory and things that you like to spend a little bit more, like dining out, going to different concerts, doing whatever those things that you like to do. What are those two numbers? So how far back can you dial it?
exactly, and that's sometimes referred to as a dynamic withdrawal strategy based on how the market's doing. And again, working with your professional, they can kind of help you and guide you along the way as well. Well, Dan, I mean, hopefully we helped some people out there that they understand that it's not a one size fits all, but it can be a good place to start with that question: how much money do I need to retire? Any last words, comments? What are your thoughts?
I guess for me, it would just be, for the 4% rule, understand what it is, understand who it works best for. And if it's not you right now, then just keep saving and investing and revisit it when the time comes.
Love it. That's awesome. Well, I want to thank you, Dan. Again, it's always fun to jam. Let's get cracking. I love your nutcracker, man. And let's thank everyone for joining us today. We really do appreciate it. Thank you for sharing with someone else that you think would find value at the Extreme Personal Finance Show. And we really encourage you to like, subscribe, follow wherever you get your podcasts. And we're on YouTube as well. Go ahead and click the bell so you get a notification every time a new episode drops. And we will see you next time on the Extreme Personal Finance Show. See ya!